Welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, this is Jessica with Turn the Page podcast from Syosset Public Library, and I am thrilled to have our author guest today. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us about your book?
Yes, hi, I'm Kyra Wilder, and I wrote a book called Bandaged Days that's coming out in April of this year. So I'm really excited to get a chance to be on the podcast. I'm a big podcast listener myself. So let's see. My book is about a woman who moves to Geneva with two young children and into this little apartment, and she goes with the best intentions and gets in over her head pretty quickly, but she doesn't really have anyone to tell that she's in over her head. There's no one for her really to turn to. Her husband's working all the time, and she just finds herself really alone in these little parks and playing in the sandbox and increasingly isolated. And I think that's something that happens to a lot of us with young children. So I think that's where I started from with the story.
So while I was reading this book, I in my mind, and here's the problem with my initial analogy. My initial analogy was this is a modern yellow wallpaper. But the problem with that analogy is I do not think that the yellow wallpaper is set to a specific time, even though we know that what happened in that book was a thing that happened to a lot of women where they were locked away. I think even women who do not physically get locked away can still relate to it because you are so isolated in this role of motherhood that I think often the yellow wallpaper is all around you. So I still think there's an analogy there because so much of your book deals with isolation and motherhood and the fact that nobody really seems to get it in the mother's life in your book, even her husband. And it's such a story that needs to be told. And I think that's why we keep getting books about this time period. So tell us about why you decided to have her move to another country.
Well, just first, I love the yellow wallpaper look at it. And I think just getting a little bit more into the meat of the plot, I really feel like, I grew up with we all read Yellow Wallpaper, and then it just gets into the back of your head and it never leaves. So
it really doesn't. Like, I really do think that the wallpaper is all around, like it's in our mind.
Yes. No, it's completely true. Like, I think you read it and it never leaves you. So I think definitely was in the back of my head. And the way that I would put it for this book is that she has her relationship with her kids. Like, the woman in the yellow wallpaper isn't taking care of her children directly. It's post, she's not engaged in childcare like my character is, but right. She has a relationship with her house that is driving her crazy, that I wanted to deal with in like a very okay, I wanted to make it creepy and scary, but like also like my personal relationship with my house is very antagonistic sometimes, like I've got like all this endless domestic, duties that every parent, mother or father or whatever caretakers are constantly engaged in. And I was just feeling constantly like this is the relationship I didn't want. This is my other child that is messy and needy, and I can't live up to the expectations that I never even wanted to. I want to be a good parent to my kids, but I hate this house. So I think that some of this came with like a little bit of that. But yeah, no, Yellow Wallpaper was definitely there, and sort of like that domestic horror that I like, Shirley Jackson and all that. Of course, I'm a huge fan. So.
Oh man, me too. Shirley Jackson does do a lot with like the physical, like house as a character in an active character in her horror, which I don't know why. It was just until you said that I was like, wait a second. It just hit me, but that's true.
Yeah,
And
women's relationship with their domestic environment is like the true horror in some of her stories. Like somebody picks up a teaspoon and you're like, oh my God, this is going to be bad. But
yes,
it's like...
yes, I know exactly which teaspoon you speak of. That came up in another podcast interview a few weeks ago. Yeah, so I mean, it was just, this book was just so compelling. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting, and I have my own theory about this, but I would love to hear yours. I mean, your intention behind it, rather. The main character, she refers to her family, both her children and her husband, as their first initial. What drove that decision?
I think that for me, that really brought together what's happening with her is that, like, I think she even says it at one point in the book, that she wants to be in a family that loves each other, that has nicknames for each other. So
yes, she does.
On the surface, it's like, this is just an outward sign how we're showing each other how close and we know everything about each other. So we have these cute intimacies and we're just sort of like projecting intimacy. But like her real reason for not being able to say anyone's name is because something terrible has happened and she can't bring herself to say their names. She can't get there. So right. It's like both of that at the same time for her, like projecting intimacy while like at the same time not being able to confront like horror.
Right.
So that's, yeah.
Yeah, no, it was good. And one of the things when I was starting to get into it, was thinking about when you follow a lot of these mommy blogs, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term sanctimommy.
I think I can guess what it means.
Yeah, there's a lot of mommy blogs out there, and I'm not calling anybody out specifically, because parents, mothers do this also just on social media, where they'll write about something that's happening, and a lot of times like there are mom blogs out there, like Scary Mommy, for instance, that is like, listen, this is tough. But a lot of them are also like, oh, take a look at this beautiful Pinterest ready family, but they'll use the first initial of their children's name, like they're like, it's like a secret, like it's you don't want to give your child out to the world because they don't have agency of having their name used. But you also want to be like, hey, this is my child E, and M came home from work. So in the beginning, and what I loved about just the way that the story unfolded was, in the beginning, I was like, okay, so, she's following that code. But what you had said became clearer and clearer as the story went on.
Yeah. I kind of love that about the sanctimommy stuff, because just like personally, I would say whenever like my kids' snack boxes at preschool were too perfect, like that's when I was like having a break. Like, like whenever I was cutting the sandwiches into like fish shapes, like it was not good,
Yeah, definitely. I can relate to that. I think like, I think I mentioned earlier, and I know I've talked about it on this podcast a few times. I have twins, and those early days were just so isolating. And, there are so many things that people say to mothers from the outside, and that mothers say to other mothers, that is not necessarily helpful.
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot. And I think about that a lot when I was reading this book. And, the mother in this book has like a weird relationship with her own mother, which is complex. Mother-daughter relationships are complex, especially after they become mothers.
Yeah. I like it was funny. I liked her relationship with her mom because she's really always, her desire to like project happiness like starts with her own mom, but she's not talking to her mom about this is crazy, how did you handle it? It's like, I've got this, I'm putting a little French flag on this weird picture of a baguette or whatever it is. It's like, it's great, and so I think it's like this desire to like impress your mom and have it all together when you have kids, too, instead of like, oh, help, this is a nightmare,
Yeah. And she had this, and again, like, I don't want to really I want the audience to get a taste of the story without me spelling everything out. And the story itself is very good like that. It just brings you on this journey of madness, much like the Yellow Wallpaper did, but in a completely different context. And then you get to the end and you're just like, oh. And I think actually, I feel like I read the Yellow Wallpaper first in an English class in college, and it was like women in literature from this period to this period. So we read it around the same time we read The Awakening and all of those books that dealt with women's issues, but from that time, from a different time period. There were no other guys, and there were no guys in the class. Like, it just there were no guys. And this was the late 90s, and I don't know if it was just that guys were like, ugh, like, I'm not doing this, or if that would be the same thing now if you had a class with the same title. But it was a real knock in the head to a lot of us. So my husband ended up going back to school in 2010 for a different career. And so one of his prerequisites was to just take an English class. And they read that in the English class. And he comes back and he's like, oh my God, this story. And I'm like, I know. And this is before I had kids. So,
but did he read it in, because I just heard sort of like male commentary on the Yellow Wallpaper, more focused on, is it a ghost story? Is it real? They're kind of like this, I mean, just to be like very general. And then and there's not so much about like the rest cure and that this was really happening to women. Like, I mean, it is a great ghost story. It's a fantastic ghost story. You can read it both ways. Like,
right, of course.
Like bed nailed to the floor. It's all amazing. But I think in like an English, I think it can go two ways. Like, I'm guessing in a women's studies class, it would be more like the rest cure. Have you read Fat and Blood?
No. Should I? What's it called? I'm writing this down.
I have it right here. It is, it's the actual text that like the doctor was prescribing, and it's insane. It's like, you don't want to say it's like scarier than the ghost story, because her art is amazing, and I would never minimize like that project, but like that book is the real like monster. That's the monster in the Wallpaper, is that this is a text that's being distributed. And so like, I think I would just say like, it's both great, like the English and is it a ghost story, is it not a ghost story, versus like, this is social history,
right,
in a women's studies class perspective. So
and
that are great.
Yeah, no, actually, thank you for letting me know about that. And I'm going to put this in the show notes so people can look at it, because I think that it's interesting that, the truth is often scarier than fiction.
Yeah, and that he talks about it as a punishment. He's saying these women, the doctor is kind of like, oh, these like sick vampiric women will try to drain you. So keep them in bed to sort of like cure and punish them at the same time. And it's all these little details, like feed them only milk, but after 2 weeks, if they're complaining about milk, like squeeze limes in their milk if they complain, and then they won't complain about the milk. And it's like,
wow.
But this is all just like very detached, like medical recommendations, like electricity, massage, milk, and rest. And it's like, so.
I mean, and okay, so in the book, there's also a second dialogue that's happening that seems like it's happening in some sort of medical field. How did you decide where you were going to put that part versus the mother's story? in the narrative.
Well, that was actually I would say like the best part of this whole experience for me has been getting to get something that you write edited by like a really good editor, like it's been like, oh, right, because I wrote it originally as I think I had a small piece in the introduction of that italic part, then I had the whole thing, and then I had as like sort of an after. It was more in chunks. It wasn't, and it was my editor that suggested to cut it up and to just change the length. Like I think they're shorter. It just really brought it all together. So I would say, yeah, once it was suggested, then I cut it up and I put it into those pieces, and it made sense. But that was really just part of the best part of having a book come out, is like having somebody look at your crayon drawing and then like turn it into like, whoa, look at this trick,
Like a mosaic almost.
Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, this would make so much more sense. So yeah. So it was my editor.
It was great. Because it always came up at the perfect moment, and it broke the tension by adding new tension.
Yes.
Which was wonderful. And sort of getting back to the whole sanctimommy thing, what I also thought was interesting was her sort of gaze at other mothers, and she's trying so hard to do her best, and she's looking at these other mothers and they seem like they're not struggling the same way that she is.
Yeah. I think you're always looking out, like, because you've got this thing that you're trying to do that is like harder than anything you've ever done before it, and also you're more scared of failing at it than ever before. So so you're always, I think, looking out. And I think people don't always say the most helpful things, to you. Like I think I've said before, but it was my second child that had colic for a year. Like he just cried for a year, and I couldn't get, I went to the doctor and there was all this advice. This was really like probably where I went back to when I was writing the book, was having this baby that cried for a year. And people would say, oh, well, are you eating too much sugar? And like, or did you have coffee? And it was like, yes, I had coffee. Yes, I'm, and then it was all these things that you never thought of before. Like I never thought I am putting jam on my toast. Is this why he's crying? And you just want to shake them and say, tell me, is this why he's crying? So I was just amazed that I had so many people offer advice all the time when I also have this baby crying in my ears all the time. So I think I was really tuned into other people, like with their not crying babies, I think is probably their, like where that sort of emotion comes from in the book.
Right. Yeah. And like your sleep cycle is just nuts.
Yeah.
Whether you 2 under 2 or even a new baby. One thing I think that I noticed as a new mom, when you're a new mom, like most of the time you're very focused on your own tasks. You don't have to schedule time to brush your teeth and wash your face. Mm-hmm. You just do it. There's not the needs of somebody else in that respect. You don't have this small, helpless child who might start crying the minute the toothbrush hits your teeth, and you're just like spitting out your toothpaste. And you're like, I'm coming. Are you okay? And there's so much anxiety and so much advice that you get. And you
can never get away from it. I remember on one of those sleepless nights where I'm just up with the kids, right? And I thought, okay, you're constantly barraged by media too, telling you. And so I took a quiz, because they send you constantly in your inbox, what kind of mom are you? And I've got 2 children on top of me. It's 3 a.m. And I took this quiz and I thought it was fun and cute. Like I thought the results were going to be like Mary Poppins. And I just got this picture of like this woman, her face is melting off, and the caption was like, "You are the overwhelmed mom." And
Oh no.
but it's like, then that really stuck with me. Like, you can't even in like a lighthearted way like break out of this, like the barrage of advice and media that's coming after you all the time.
All the time. Yeah. And I guess one direction I want to go in, because it was so interesting to me, is her husband and how he is, in the beginning you find out, okay, we're moving. I know this is going to be very stressful on you and the kids. This is going to demand a lot of me. And, she's like, oh, this is fine. This is fine. Which eventually goes to, this is fine, but really it's not. How did you decide to craft the amount of absence that he was going to have, and his relationship to his wife as she unwound?
Yeah, I think his absence was both like practical, because when you do start a new job, like there is a huge amount of absence kind of built in. So I didn't have to go too far like to create that situation. But on the other hand, like it was important to me that that he wasn't like a monster. He wasn't, he was a real person, like not kind of the evil villain character. I did like joke with my husband. I said, I would like you to pose for the cover, and he lost it.
Oh my.
He was like,
wow,
you have created, everyone's going to think he's me. Everyone's going to think he's me. So the anxiety kind of came out for my poor husband publishing this book. But I do think the absence was important because he's not a monster. He's just under a different kind of stress. Like, and I think like that's part of having kids, where they're, now somebody's got to make money. Like, whereas before, not as much the case at all, So, I mean, there's like economic stress and job stress and new job stress. So the absence was important because this is going to be something private for her. And also just the ways that she doesn't have a job, but she's going to have work, or however you want to, like, she's going to have to do this herself, that sort of thing. So she's not getting a lot of support, and she's going to have to go through this, like, on her own. And it happens to a lot of people. There's a lot of people that are kind of doing this, like, where their partner is away a lot.
I know, paternity leave is not commonplace, at least here in the States. There are definitely an increasing amount of companies that are offering it. However, it's not, unilateral, and it's still not common by any means. Where you are now, is paternity leave more common?
I would say, actually, I'm not 100% on. So I think there's some paternity leave, but there's a much better maternity leave situation in Switzerland than in the US. And there is a small amount of paternity, but it's not a huge. It's a similar. It's not like Sweden, or some of these Nordic countries. I think it's a little bit better than the US, but not. It's not entirely different. And
I mean, most places are at least a little bit better. At least,
US.
Yeah. Not the best.
No, the US is real low there, but I think it's similar with the paternity leave situation. And then I think here you get a lot of international families as well, and that situation is usually pretty skewed towards one person away internationally. There's a lot of people working with the UN here, so then you really have your partner's not even in the same country a lot of the time. So I think you see both of that here.
But I think even like terminology, maternity leave, paternity leave, just parental leave in general, it's certainly, I mean, definitely in the US, and I'm sure in many other places, the whole idea of it for the health of the parents and for the child, and just the overall, if you say you care about families and you want families to be healthy, I think it just needs an overhaul in terminology and in practice in many places.
Yeah, and I think I was struck because I think you get a few weeks off at the beginning, so it's almost like because I had babies in the U.S., so my experience of the maternity parental leave situation is a U.S. situation. And it was very focused on the physical, but there's not, I'm like, I can't believe nobody's called me to see like how my mental health is with a 3-month-old. Like they just keep sending me home with this baby, and I just think there are like resources, but there's just not enough. Like when I called like a helpline with my colicky child at like 3 or 4 months old, and I literally couldn't afford the babysitting to get my 17-month-old to go get like the help that I really, really needed at the time. Like I think it's like this huge holistic thing of like, well, okay, so you're providing some services, but are you providing babysitting services for that person that really should come in and talk to someone? So the problem is so big that I think we just kind of don't deal with it. But like the holistic need for those paternity and maternity and parental services is enormous. Like it's got to be much more psychological, like, and I mean, not, it's gonna be physical and psychological, like the whole package.
Absolutely. So is this the official cover of the book?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I am okay. Very good. So I see that the tagline here, and again, I'm going to put a note to put this in the picture of that in the show notes. How thin is the line between motherhood and madness? And you have like a match like burned down to its last bit.
Yeah,
did you have any say in the cover and that tagline?
No, I was, again, amazing editing. Like it was just such a gift to just, they take your stuff and the words and then they make them even better. And then they wrap it up in an amazing wrapping paper. And then they put a bow like that on it. And you're like, wow, look, I'm just gonna pat myself on the back. That's amazing. But no, I had nothing to do with any of it, but I love it.
I love it too. This book is great. It's so thick with mood and setting. I think a lot of mothers and parents are, I think are going to see a little bit of themselves in what happens in this book. And I think, like a good suspense, Shirley Jackson-esque story, the whole picture really comes into play. The setting, of the country, the apartment, the dialogue, it's just all such a good package. And
well, thank you so much. Thank you.
Are you working on another book?
Well, when I had this, I have a dream. I told my kids, now the oldest is about to leave primary school, but I told him when I said, oh my gosh, I got a book deal. And it's this, and I'd been telling him for years that I was writing a book called Zombie Fart Monkeys, and it was going to be in his library and he was going to have my picture on it and it was going to have his name in it. So yeah, no, I would love to write Zombie Fart Monkeys, but I'm currently working on kind of a take on the Hesperides. But Zombie Fart Monkeys is the dream.
Zombie Fart Monkeys would be the book that my kids want to read.
Well, I want it to happen. That's the ultimate dream.
Are you listening? All of the publishers who might tune into this.
It's a series. I'll write 10 of them. I'll write 20.
I was going to say, I'm not sure. Like the Overlook Press was the one who published Little Bandaged Days. I don't know if they have a in the whole parent company, if there's a subset for a market for Zombie Fart Monkeys.
Yeah,
this whole interview took a completely different turn. It's like you're like, this way, run, zombie, like motherhood and madness and Zombie Fart Monkeys, which I would argue is kind of in the same path for those of us who've kind of moved past. Yeah, like really, like you're in this world and you're going through, whatever you need to go through as a young mother. And if you get past that, if you make it past that, thank goodness a lot of us do, you get to zombie fart monkeys, and it is so rewarding.
I mean, I'm practicing the illustrations. Like, I'm serious artistically about this project. So,
oh yeah. So,
well, maybe I'll be back for a podcast in 5 years with zombie fart monkeys.
Well, please come back for a podcast about the book that you're working on now as well, because yes. I'm not going to hold out for zombie fart monkeys, but when it happens, I will applaud you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. So once again, starting with Little Bandaged Days and moving to zombie fart monkeys. Once again, my fabulous guest today was
Kyra Wilder.
And this is Jessica with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page, and we are going to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.